What up, Fight World? It's your boy Ego, and I'm back with some more boxing. Back with the boxing clinic, Death of the Power Punchers. Now, 2015 has been a great year from boxing. We've seen some great matches, a lot of good fights, just a lot of boxing in general. They brought boxing to Premier Boxing Champs. We had our normal HBO Showtime. It's on a bunch of networks. Rock Nation signed a bunch of guys. So boxing has been good. Now, one thing I noticed with 2015, we've seen some upsets, namely in the fashion of the power puncher, the guy who was considered to have the most power, the lethal punching power. We've seen a lot of matches where the bigger puncher ended up losing. So that's what I want to explore in this particular video. And I want to give my thoughts and insight on how it all happened and why the guy with the bigger power lost the particular fight as I seen it. Now, this is the thing. Power is great to have in boxing. Like, if I was a fighter, I would love to have power in my arsenal. However, there's a lot of casual fans and they think power is the end all be all. Like, when I watch some like predictions and hear comments and stuff or read comments, I see a lot of people and they always lean to the guy with the most power. Again, I have nothing against power punchers. Some of my favorite fighters in history have been punchers, but power is not the end all be all. What I mean by that is for everyone that has power, or actually not even power, in boxing, the sweet science, everything, every trait, every characteristic that a fighter can have can be negated. If a guy has killer speed, you can negate that with timing, with accurate punching. You know what I mean? Slow him down to the body. Same thing with power. There's ways to get around power, like a good solid defense, a real tight defense. And let's get right into it, break down how some of these fighters were able to negate the bigger puncher. Now, let's look at Timothy Bradley versus Bam Bam Brandon Rios. Now, this was a culmination of excellent game planning with Teddy Atlas and Timothy Bradley. What I think they did as far as the game plan, this was their first fight together, and we know in boxing sometimes when you have a new trainer or whatever, the pairings don't mesh up. I mean, he was with Joel Diaz for 10 plus years or whatever, so nobody knew exactly how this would pan out, being that it was their first fight together, but they executed. And I think what they did to execute was they had a terrific game plan. They know Brandon Rios. And to Brandon Rios, this is a mistake he made. All you fighters and whatnot. I seen an interview before the fight where he was saying the first couple of weeks or first month of training camp, it's on YouTube, he said it was hell for him. And it was really hard to get into shape. You never allow your enemy, your opponent, to see those types of chinks in your armor. So I would have just zipped it, even if I had the most hellish time trying to lose weight or whatever, or in my training camp get back in the swing of things, because he was inactive for about 8 months. You never reveal that, because that's what they use to really defeat him. Timothy Bradley's not a big puncher. He's not especially at 147. He probably had more power at 140. But it was good game planning, and it was a consistent game plan. And what Timothy Bradley and Teddy Atlas did is they knew that Brandon Rios he's weak to the body. Like, if you ever seen the movie Bloodsport with Chong Li, Van Damme was like, "Hey Frankie, what are you doing? Keep going. Chong Li is sweet to the gut." Like, he was telling him to hit him in the body. And that's exactly what made Brandon Rios fall. Brandon Rios could take a headshot all day. You know what I mean? It doesn't. He has a chin. He has one of the best chins in boxing. But they hit him in the breadbasket where it hurts. And that's something you can't play off. Brandon Rios can get punched in the face and then grin like it doesn't hurt. Pacquiao hit him and he's smiling because he has a chin. But when you get hit to the body, especially if you're vulnerable, especially if you party too much and you're off season, you've been inactive, and they knew, Teddy Atlas and Timothy Bradley, they knew that Brandon Rios was not the type of fighter that is highly disciplined and is off season. He had a fight with Kell Brook that was in negotiations that kept falling through, and in his inactive time, who knows what he did? Maybe he was drinking beer or eating crazy and ballooning up in weight. And later it was revealed that he gained like 53 pounds, or had to drop 53 pounds. And so basically he was pushing almost 200 pounds and had to drop back down to 147. Now, this is no excuse because this is the fight game. And if it were a lesser fighter, they probably wouldn't have been able to do that to Brandon Rios, with whether he was having trouble making a weight or not. Bradley is an excellent fighter, and he stuck to the game plan. And he used, he invested to the body early, and that's really what did it for me. He was investing to the body, and it was a dedicated body attack throughout from the early rounds. He listened to his corner, which is what he didn't do sometimes with Joel Diaz. He wasn't listening to all the corner advice from Joel Diaz in certain fights like Ruslan Provatnikov, and he invested to that body. He didn't get too reckless and fight with a chip on his shoulder, and eventually Brandon Rios he couldn't take it anymore, and he got dropped to the body, got back up, tried, and it was depleted. So that's one example of the lighter puncher coming out on top. It just great strategy, great game plan, sticking to a game plan. He didn't have to adapt too much in the fight because what he was doing was working. And Brandon Rios also being the slower fighter and Bradley being the more athletic, it just played into his hands nicely. Next fight is Victor Postol versus Lucas Matthysse. Now this is a good one because a lot of people that I seen, they were picking Matthysse. And I told people that Victor Postol is not someone to sleep on. I mean, this is a guy who sparred with Manny Pacquiao. This is a guy who comes from the Ukraine school of boxing. And most importantly, this is what I noticed. A lot of people, when they do their predictions, I could tell they don't look at all the variables. Maybe they don't know the guy or they don't do their homework or whatever. But if I don't know a guy, then I do my research. I get on YouTube. I try to find video. I go to BoxRec, see what the variables and different intangibles are. Victor Postol was like 4 inches taller. And Matthysse is typically a good boxer puncher, but that 4 inches, especially if they're good boxers, a motherfucker. And that's what Postol showed. And I liked his game plan. Him and Freddie Roach had a great game plan. They used his height. He didn't come down to Matthyisse's height and fight small. He fought tall. He used a great jab, a very crisp jab. Again, coming from, there's certain schools that are renowned for just overall good boxing. The Cuban boxing schools, the Ukraine boxing schools, etc. And he comes from that. And he's in the wild card gym, so I know Freddie Roach has him with some tough, young, strong guys and whatever for this Matthysse fight. And he used a great jab, and he frustrated. He did clinch, and some people complain, but this is the fight game. You're there to win. And Matthysse, he was getting frustrated. He was getting frustrated between the long reach, the jab, and the clinching. It totally took Matthysse out of his element, and he didn't have no answers. And he eventually got hurt to the body. He got hurt a little bit earlier than that too, and he got hurt and ended up quitting. And he didn't want to no mas. He basically just he wasn't having anymore. And it comes from when you're frustrated, it's easier to make mistakes, and that's what Victor Postol did. He clinched. He would get his work off, and then when Matthysse would try to do what he did in other fights, like Ruslan Provatnikov is a good fighter, but he's very one-dimensional. And when he's seen the different dimensions of Postol's boxing game, and another thing is when you have a power puncher, it's very discouraging when they haven't been able to really hurt you. And actually, there was a point where Victor Postol, it looked like he got wobbled and looked like he got buzzed, but that discourages a power puncher when shots that normally knock people out, like Mike Dallas Jr., you're able to recover from it. And that showed me a lot of durability and tenacity with Victor Postol. The fact that he did get hurt at one point in this fight, and he was composed and he got right back to his game plan and just outboxed the hell out of Lucas Matthysse, and it was the end of the machine. The machine got unplugged. Now let's look at Andres Fonfara versus Julio Cesar Chavez Jr. Another very similar to Timothy Bradley versus Brandon Rios. Chavez Jr. was on a long layoff. He's not the most disciplined dude. He made up, I think, a weight division for this particular fight, and he was in there with a very good boxer with the type of experience. Now, this is a fight where Chavez Jr., he should have listened to his father. Chavez Sr., Julio Cesar Chavez Sr., said he didn't want him to fight Fonfara, especially after a long layoff. He had like a legal trouble with Top Rank, and he was crossing over to the Al Haymon side, and he fought on Showtime, and he should have listened to his father because Fonfara put on a boxing, it looked like an exhibition, but it was his boxing clinic. Just great boxing. He fought tall. He used a jab. He moved, and that's another thing with that I noticed with Chavez Jr. He's almost, I don't know if it's dealing with his like being out of shape, but it's almost like he wants the fight to come to him. And the fact that Fonfara was working 3-minute rounds, he was working a good percentage of that, and he was just outboxing and hitting. You seen Chavez Jr. getting frustrated, just like Matthysse versus the Victor Postal. He was in there getting his ears boxed off and his socks boxed off, and he was getting frustrated because he couldn't make it the inside fight, the overwhelming fight. It's not the same as overwhelming a smaller Andy Lee or whoever. Fonfara is a light heavyweight, not to mention he has the experience of being in there with a guy, a champion like Adonis Stevenson, getting dropped and then dropping Adonis Superman Stevenson. So this is not a pushover. We just seen him recently versus Nathan Cleverly after this fight, and he looked good in that fight too. So just Fonfara did an awesome job of boxing Chavez and not letting the moment get too big. Chavez is the son of a legend, and it's easy to, I don't know, fight the wrong type of fight trying to do too much, but he used great boxing, great movement, and he was in great conditioning because he worked at a frenetic pace. Chavez Jr. couldn't keep it up, and he got knocked down, and it was another Lucas Matthysse no mas type of situation where he was getting hurt in there, and he had no answers. He was getting dominated. I had him losing every single round. I don't think I gave Chavez Jr. any round because there's maybe in like the early rounds, the first 2 rounds, there was some inside work he was doing that looked pretty good, some body shots, but it just, he wasn't working long enough. These are 3-minute rounds, so I can't give a guy a round for a flurry, like a 10-second flurry, and Fonfara just dominated him. So that was another power puncher or perceived power puncher that it wasn't their night. Finally, we have Floyd Mayweather Jr. versus Manny Pacquiao, Cinco de Mayweather. This was a fight that was debated for 5 years. I did like a 30-minute prediction, a lot of coverage leading up to this fight. And to be honest, this fight was exactly how I expected it. It played out exactly how I, go listen to my prediction that I did prior to the actual fight. And the biggest thing that Mayweather, I told people, Pacquiao is a good fighter, but he makes a lot of mistakes. The thing is, he's such a talent and a phenom that his athleticism and what he does right can oftentimes overcome the mistakes that he makes because he's so awkward. And if you don't have the brain and the ring IQ and processing speed of a Mayweather, Pacquiao is trouble for anybody. You have to be a smart fighter like Mayweather, like Juan Manuel Marquez, who's giving them tough fights. And that's really because they're thinkers in there. They're counterpunchers. And Floyd just happens to be very similar to Marquez, but like a souped up version. He's more athletic. He has long ass arms. He has way more speed than Marquez, better footwork, everything that Marquez does. And this is not shitting. Marquez is one of my all-time favorites, but Floyd Mayweather does pretty much better. Like he's faster, he's taller, those types of things. And he has a ton of experience too. So Manny Pacquiao, the biggest thing that I noticed that Floyd did is he came out aggressive. A lot of people sleep on this because, oh, this is the fight of the century. He didn't live up to it. Watch the fight. What happened? I'm talking about what actually happened in the fight. I don't care about these articles after the fact. Mayweather, he came out aggressive. He knew he was in there with the southpaw, and he immediately asserted himself, like, to let Pacquiao know, like, you know what I'm saying, I'm here. And that's what you have to do with the awkward southpaw. You don't want him to get into a rhythm. Pacquiao had his moment in round 4, and Mayweather played it off perfect because he walked himself back to the ropes, calm. That's another thing. People sleep on Mayweather for this. Mayweather, you could tell he's experienced because he remains calm in the most clutch situations. Like Shane Mosley had him badly hurt in that round 2, and he was so fucking calm. He was even firing back and had some good shots hurt against Shane Mosley in that round 2, and he got hurt twice in that round. Same thing with Pacquiao. Pacquiao clipped him with that left, hurt him. He calmly walked himself back to the ropes, let Pacquiao unload his arsenal as he did the like Josh Clottey, very tight shell defense. Pacquiao realized that this wasn't effective. After that main straight left that hit him, all that onslaught wasn't really hitting. It was like partially hitting or blocked or whatever, and he didn't want to punch himself out. So even if you watch the fight, Pacquiao kind of takes a step back, like, hey, let me regroup. Let me not do too much trying to knock him out. And that was his moment. After that, it was back to the Mayweather show. You guys could bring up shoulder injuries or whatever, but the biggest thing that I noticed, the biggest deficiency, is Mayweather capitalized on Pacquiao's mistakes. And one of them is he leaps in. He leaped into a nasty uppercut in the late rounds, which was disgusting. Mayweather bowled this vicious, very sharp, precise uppercut, and it just like looked like it clicked Pacquiao's teeth together. Aside from that, the biggest thing I noticed, Pacquiao could not close the distance. He's the shorter fighter. He is the guy with the shorter arms. And what he was typically used to doing is using his footwork and jumping and sidestepping and moving at weird angles and stuff. That ambush style, that in and out stuff that he does, it just wasn't working. And he couldn't close the distance. Mayweather, what he uses with his jab, he always had a jab out there, and he's measuring the distance. He's seeing exactly how far Pacquiao is. Watch that fight again. It had nothing to do with the shoulder. It had something to do with the fact that Mayweather always kept Pacquiao out of range of really like launching a vicious attack. And Pacquiao even tried, and he was making the mistake over and over again. He was trying to launch an attack from like 4 feet out, and it just wasn't going to work because Mayweather has very good feet, and he always knows his position in the ring. He always knows his escape route. He has a tight defense, and he never lets you get too comfortable. So that's really what I've seen, and that's why the power puncher in this particular fight, an awkward southpaw with a ton of experience, was not able to dethrone the undefeated Mayweather. It just, he could not close the distance. Mayweather kept him at bay with the jab. He was a bit more aggressive than he normally is, and that right was just landing at will, and people sleep on the counterpuncher. You don't have to be the biggest puncher in your division, but if you are hitting somebody with precise, snappy, sharp punches for 12 rounds, it's going to make them think twice. You know what I'm saying? It doesn't matter what your power level is. If you're hitting them that flush, these are two grown-ass men, and that's what Mayweather was doing. Plus, I think Mayweather's power is underrated. People think he has actually no pop. The thing is, I don't think he's offensive-minded as much as some other fighters. So he would have to take a big risk and, like, you know what I mean, give up a fight he's winning, possibly, if he were to get caught trying to do too much. But Mayweather's smart, so he always sticks to a game plan. And finally, Lamont Peterson versus Danny Garcia. Now, this one is more of a runner-up, and I didn't want to put it with the rest of the list. That's why it's coming at the end, and that's only because the power puncher actually won, although it was very controversial, and a lot of people thought that Lamont Peterson should have won, and some people even think he got robbed or whatever. So that's why I'm using this as a runner-up. Now, I still want to explore this fight. Again, excellent game plan, Barry Hunter and Lamont Peterson. And the thing is, with Danny Garcia, I think he's a boxer-puncher with power. That's very different than being like, he's not like a Gennady Golovkin, Ruslan Provodnikov, like a guy who's going to come forward and like nonstop bring that pressure. And knowing that, Lamont Peterson and Barry Hunter devised a great game plan because they knew they were the faster fighter, faster feet, more athletic, about Danny Garcia's size, in good shape, great conditioning, and they made Danny Garcia work early. They knew he was slow. He's a slow fighter. He's a good fighter, but he's slow. Let's be real. And Danny Garcia is, again, he's not like he's more of a counterpuncher, a boxer puncher, counterpuncher, than a stalking type of Brandon Rios type of fighter. So him cutting off the ring was not the same, especially against an athletic guy. He's better when a guy's like maybe like a Eric Morales at his age or whatever, or Lucas Matthysse, who's going to kind of bring a machismo fight to him, so to speak. But Lamont Peterson showed a very tight defense, and he used a lot of great movement and a very crispy jab early. And a jab disrupts everything, especially if you're slow. It disrupts what you're trying to do. You're trying to get in, especially when that's not your side. A lot of times fighters, especially if they have power, sometimes they go away. Like Lucas Matthysse is a boxer puncher, but sometimes he goes away from that boxer puncher and the boxing skills that he does have, and he becomes more of a brawler. And that's kind of what we've seen. That's why Danny Garcia looked a lot sloppier in this fight, because he was trying to make the fight, and he was trying to, maybe after the Matthysse wins and knocking Rod Salka out and people like that, maybe he just wanted to inflict punishment and try to be like more of a pressure fighter, but he's not really that. And that's the thing. If you're like Amir Khan, who was fighting a good fight, but he was still jumping in and stuff like that, he was able to time and catch Amir Khan. Versus Lamont Peterson, very sound defense. He made him work, crispy jab, and he used a lot of lateral movement. And Danny Garcia got tired by the midway point, And then that's when Lamont Peterson hit the switch and he revealed something. This is very similar to what Victor Postol did. Victor Postol, I think he made the switch a little bit sooner than Lamont Peterson. That's why this fight was a controversial scoring. But both fighters, Lamont Peterson and Victor Postol versus Matthysse, what they did is they show you one thing for a few rounds, and you're like, oh, this is it. Victor Postol was just he was clinching, he was using a good jab and not landing as much dedicated. He didn't show you he had like a poker face. He didn't show you his whole hand. And same thing with Lamont Peterson. He didn't show his whole offensive hand. He showed you like a jab, kept a punch out there, used some movement, just defense and stuff like that. So when he had Danny Garcia tired, then he started opening up and throwing everything but the kitchen sink and like really digging to the body and slowing Danny Garcia down more, who was already fatiguing. And it was a great game plan. I just wish Lamont Peterson would have made the switch earlier, and then there would have been no controversy at all on who won the fight. But I think for the first half of the fight, he was more just jabbing, and you had a guy like Danny Garcia who's really trying to make the fight, even though he was missing a lot because of Lamont Peterson's athleticism and defense. But sometimes judges, they're scoring what they see Danny Garcia, he's landing, even though he's missing and looking sloppy, he's still landing what are considered power punches, which is pretty much everything not named a jab. You know what I mean? And I think Lamont Peterson looked good in there in the second half. He kept him at bay, and he just broke his dude down. And again, when you're tired, you make mistakes. When you're frustrated, you make mistakes. And that's what happened. He was having to search for Lamont Peterson, and then fatigue kicked in. And then on top of that, he opened up with his offense of his own and obviously had the conditioning and the stamina to do that. It was just, it wasn't looking good. And you've seen Danny Garcia's face look at all like peppered and tattered up by the end of the fight. And that's why this fight is controversial. So that is my list. The Boxingego Clinic, death to the power puncher. Now, this is not saying power punchers cannot win. Of course, we see it all the time. People get slept, crazy knockouts. So power punchers are still lethal, still dangerous. But this year we've seen a lot of upsets in regards to power punchers. And again, power's not everything. There's no one skill that cannot be neutralized in boxing. That is the beauty of the sweet science, period. If you have speed, if you have power, if you have height, anything like that could be neutralized with the right approach. Let me know what you guys think. Make sure you like my video as always. Hate, comment, and subscribe. Till next video, is Ego signing off.